Okay, we are with Stephen Drake Jones. And Stephen, can you tell us a little how the Wellington Society started in Madrid and when you started it?
Well, I first came here in 1975, made a conscientious decision to stay in Madrid. And so on the 18th of June 1979, so that's 41 years ago, I founded the Wellington Society. And if you're going to found a society, go to the top. So I wrote to His Grace the 8th Duke of Wellington and asked if he would be my honorary president. And he graciously said yes. And until he passed away about 6 years ago in his 90s, I always wrote to him every three months to let him know what the society is doing. And he replied within the week thanking me, and it was in on royal blue paper with the crown, and by hand he wrote, "My dear Stephen." Then it was typed, and at the bottom he signed Wellington.
Oh, brilliant.
So
how many years it's been done?
41 years now.
41 years.
And in that time I've written 3 books on the subject, all published.
Which ones and what about?
The first one was about the French regiment in eastern Spain, in Valencia. And then I wrote a book about Captain Samuel Dudley, 16th Light Dragoons, and his memoirs. And then I have just finished one which is called Letters Home from the Basque Country. I've collated letters from eyewitness accounts when, in 1813, they entered the Basque Country, and they're writing home, and they had spent 4 years suffering the sun of central Spain, of Extremadura, of Portugal, and they arrive about the 9th of June into the Basque Country, and it's raining. And they write home, it's raining, it's like Scotland. So that was very good. And over the 41 years, I've taken school groups from England to battlefields. I've taken British regiments over, because in their flags, their standards, they have the name of Salamanca and Fuente de Honoro and Talavera still today. So that's over 200 years later.
Yeah.
So very much part of the British regiments.
But you've not been only in Spain, you've been also like Portugal and other places?
I've been the south of France, all of Portugal, because they were campaigning but I'm based in Madrid, so it's easier. About 8 years ago, I got a phone call from a colonel in the British Army attached to NATO in Valencia, and he said, "Good morning, Mr. Drake Jones, I'm Colonel so-and-so, no names, and we would like you to give a lecture at the Royal Military Academy in Salamanca in English to NATO officers, and we can only pay you €1,000 for the day and a half. So it's 2 morning lectures and 2 afternoons going 7 kilometers south of Salamanca to visit the certain landmarks of the battle, and they'll all have their maps." And I said, yes, 1,000 seems rather agreeable to me. I said, "Colonel, how many are you?" He said, 106.
Wow.
Including 6 generals. So we did that. It's in depth. This is not just over there, but I'm talking about different regiments. The Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, and the British regiment. So it was in depth. One thing you must never do when I'm lecturing on the battlefield is interrupt. And
Or contribute.
no contribution, please. And the colonel, I had all of them on top of a hill, and that takes some time. We had to cross the freeway, and I said, "Isn't it dangerous getting 106 officers over a freeway?" And the Spanish general said, "No, Senor Drake, the Guardia Civil is stopping all traffic." until I have got everyone over. And I felt elated, shall we say. Yeah. And we got on to the top of the hill, and behind, this is where the Battle of Salamanca was fought, Wednesday 22nd of July 1812, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if anyone's interested in dates, which I am. And before I could begin, there was no talking by these officers, 106, because there were 6 generals. The highest ranking was the Spanish general, and I was 2.5 years in the Spanish Navy, and I know how to address my superiors. Yes, mi general, and he liked that, even though it had to be in English. So I got on famously with them. But the colonel, the English colonel, who's best I not mention him, in fact I can't remember his name, he began, I was about to start, and he said, behind here was a Portuguese general, and his name was General de Urban, capital D, apostrophe, capital U, R-B-A-N, and he had the 12th Portuguese cavalry, and the Portuguese general sent them that way around. And I just listened, dumbfounded, and I could tell that mi general was not happy. They were paying me as an expert, not a colonel. And he paused and he said, have you anything to add, Stephen? Not even Mr. Drake Jones, or Professor, as the rank I have. I said, sir, I do not know where to begin. But let's begin with Durban. His first name was Benjamin. He came from Westport in Norfolk, England. He went to Norwich Grammar School, which is still next to the cathedral. He did not speak a word of Portuguese. I just dismissed him totally, utterly. And another anecdote, very quickly. I got a phone call from the British Ambassador Secretary. Would I like to have lunch with the ambassador? I said, I will always have lunch with my ambassador. And we met. It's a 4-fork Indian restaurant near where the old embassy used to be. And they were dressed, him and the military attaché, white shirts, blazers, very British. And I sat opposite them, and they said, we're having this plaque put in Ciudad Rodrigo, where General Crawford and the Light Division stormed on the 19th of January 1812 at 7 o'clock in the evening. And before, the wording is, it's going to be in Spanish and in English, but I want the expert to look at it. And the military attaché said, it is correct. And the ambassador, being an ambassador, said, another colonel, let the expert look at it. And I looked, and it's about General Robert Crawford. He led the Light Brigade. His nickname was Black Bob because he had a bad temper. And he actually led the Light Division on the 19th of January 1812 at 7 o'clock in the evening up to the Lesser Breach. It's untouched today, by the way, by the gate, the Puerta de Salamanca. And he received a shot. And it says here that he was killed on the 19th of January 1812 by the Lesser Breach and was buried there. And I read it, the text, and I gave it him back. I said, it's very moving, very touching, I'm getting goose pimples, and there's only 3 mistakes. And we had very large wine glasses, and I said, he was mortally wounded on the 19th of January. He did not die until 2 o'clock in the morning of the 24th, and was buried 4 hours later by the Lesser Breach. So he didn't die, he was mortally wounded, and he died in the house next to the Church of San Cristobal. That is the fact. And so I'd reduced this military attaché that small. But we had wine glasses, and they said, they stormed a breach. I said, yeah, they went in. And the whole glass covered our ambassador in red wine, from his nose dripping off. From the moment I was glorious to being a complete idiot. 2 weeks later, to finish, 2 weeks later, each year, the 16th of June, is the Queen of England's official birthday. And 200 guests were invited. All the nations, the ambassadors in Madrid, and myself. And I happened to have an Italian girlfriend, called Chinsky from Venice, and she dressed a little outrageous, but Italian. And you have to get in line to shake hands with the ambassador and his wife before you go into the ambassador's residence. Then there's the garden, a military band comes over from England, bum, 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 and there's sausage rolls and pork pies. So it's very, very British. And I was dreading shaking hands with an ambassador who, not 2 weeks before, I had thrown a whole glass of very good claret over him. And it came to me, and I said, Mr. Ambassador. And he looked at Chinsky, he looked at me, and he turned to his wife and said, Marjorie, if ever you should dine with Drake Jones, wear a bib. Anyway, it was funny in that respect. I've taken...
Which one is the place that you think is your favorite one of all the places of the Wellington Society takes people?
Ciudad Rodrigo, because it's a walled town. It's a time warp.
It's the province of Ciudad Rodrigo?
Salamanca.
And
they had a guerrilla leader called El Charro. And El Charro, a person born in the province of Salamanca are charros. So he was El Charro. If you're born in the city of Salamanca, you're Salmantino. So he had a big black beard and he would supply Wellington with all the information. He was the eyes of the British Army. And that is my favourite of all. Salamanca, of course, because it's untouched, so to speak.
Beautiful city, yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. It's 7 miles south. And the French Marshal was Marshal Marmont, and he was on top of one hill called the Grande, still there, absolutely untouched. And there's a monument there, and his left arm was shattered by a piece of shrapnel from a corporal in the Royal Artillery in the Chico Hill opposite. And the story went around very quickly that the French Marshal had been killed. Well, he hadn't. They'd put him in a hearse, so no one could see the Marshal is wounded. Then the second rumour that spread very quickly around Salamanca is that they'd amputated his arm. And in the village of Arepiles, I presented them with a plaque dedicated to the village of Arepiles on Wednesday, 22nd of July 1812, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This great battle took place, and the English call it the Battle of Salamanca because it's easier for the English to say Salamanca. Also, it's a famous university city, rather than Arepiles, which is a tongue twister. So Wellington was very lucky. The Salamanca, Talavera. In Portugal, it was Buchaco, but it doesn't matter. And they asked the King of Spain if they could have a flag with the emblem of Marshal Marmont's arm for Arepiles, 1812, and Marshal Marmont's arm. And I whispered to the mayor, he actually didn't have his arm amputated. And he looked round and he said, you're the only one who knows that. Let's keep it a secret. Good, we will continue this on another day.
Thank you for the introduction.
My pleasure. Was that all right?